It's amazing to think that it was only last year that we experienced A Thief's End, the beautiful conclusion to the Uncharted series, and quite possibly the best ending to any video game franchise in history. It's safe to say that Nathan Drake's story is over for now, so it seemed like Uncharted 5 was still a while away if it was coming at all. Which is why it's quite surprised that now, only a year later, we're talking about a completely new Uncharted game. Hi, I'm Darrian P. Mack with the Leaderboard, and today we're talking about 7 Uncharted Lost Legacy facts that you should know. So let's start at where we last left off at the conclusion of Uncharted 4 A Thief's End. How a DLC became a full-fledged title. When A Thief's End was finally completed and released in the summer of 2016, developers began working on an Uncharted DLC. This was partially because they had made a promise to investors and fans alike to do so. However, the team had said repeatedly that if they were unsatisfied with the project, they weren't going to release it. And at first, the developers didn't know what to do. They contemplated jumping right into Uncharted 5 and starting a new storyline and characters, but with so many designers working on Last of Us Part 2, this seemed an impossible venture. So in the fall of 2016, they began work on the promised DLC. After mulling over various characters, they decided to focus the game around Chloe Frazer and Nadine Ross. It took a long time to choose the protagonist, but once they did, the development moved rather quickly. Amazingly, this is the fastest that Naughty Dog developers can remember creating a playable version of an Uncharted game. However, as the team continued working on Lost Legacy, they felt that the game required a longer story to investigate the characters' relationship and their interactions with the environment. Thus, the developers decided that Lost Legacy should be a standalone game rather than a DLC. And to be fair, while the final version of Lost Legacy is shorter than Uncharted 4, it's quite longer than Left Behind, the Last of Us DLC. Calling back old friends. If you didn't already hear, Uncharted Lost Legacy doesn't feature Nathan Drake. However, it does feature a lot of familiar faces from previous games, including on the staff. On the technical side, game director Kurt Margiano was a designer on the last 3 Uncharted entries. Writer Josh Scher wrote all of the games except for Drake's Deception, and composer Henry Jackman scored Uncharted 4, as well as Kick-Ass and the last 2 Captain Americas for all you Marvel fans out there. And the game, of course, revolves around Chloe Frazer, who was featured predominantly in Uncharted 2 and Uncharted 3, but hasn't been seen since. And no, multiplayer doesn't count. It also centers on Chloe's new partner, Nadine Ross, who was featured in Uncharted 4. The team behind Lost Legacy thought Nadine would be a good companion for Chloe, despite the fact that they've never met before, because she can both be a friend and an antagonist at the same time. However, it took a while for developers to decide that Chloe and Nadine were the right characters for the game. From the beginning, the team at Naughty Dog ruled out making another story about Nathan Drake, but they looked at almost every other side character. In fact, while the developers and writers considered obvious options like Sam, Sully, Cassie, and Cutter, Josh Scher said everyone except Jeff the cameraman from Uncharted 2 was examined.
When you put it that way, it does sound pretty stupid.
Yeah, thanks for the input, Jeff.
The team especially looked at developing a Sully storyline, but considering his age, they felt that the game wouldn't work on a purely mechanical level. Sully isn't exactly agile enough for the Uncharted brand of action. They then considered the possibility of creating a game based around a younger Sully, but his background as a Marine is well documented in previous Uncharted series, and a military story doesn't exactly jive with the game's style. So the team chose Chloe, who was originally introduced as the jaded ex-girlfriend of Nathan Drake, but is also known as an explorer in her own right. Her character had the right mechanics, but the team also liked Chloe's ability to crack jokes like Drake, as well as her ambiguous background. Along with the writers, it was up to actress Claudia Black to determine exactly what Chloe would become. Shaped by character. We should probably mention at this point that the writers at Naughty Dog don't create backstories for the characters beyond what's included in each game. So the creators of Lost Legacy had a lot to fill in about their leads, Chloe and Nadine. This allowed the actors who played them, Claudia Black and Laura Bailey respectively, to contribute a lot to the characters during production, including rewriting lines and changing blocking. And Claudia Black, who plays Chloe, enjoyed the experience so much that she called Chloe her all-time favorite character. This isn't surprising since the characters are what drive the story in Lost Legacy, and the actors who played them had a lot to do with how these brave women are portrayed, especially because of the expanded technology. Using new motion capture techniques, Naughty Dog Dog had been able to better capture performances in Lost Legacy. The team can now record slight facial expressions and small gestures that didn't register before. For example, in previous Uncharted games, the team had to animate the hand movements of actors in post as the captured suit didn't extend to the fingertips. Now, the actors wear gloves, and the animators don't have to choose whether to take extra time to include every eccentric hand gesture a performer makes. Additionally, new editing technology allowed the team on Lost Legacy to move through recorded performances in 4D space after the scene had been recorded. All of these technological advances gave the creators of Lost Legacy new freedom to record and use their actors' talents to define character choices. And that's important because, as we've said, Lost Legacy is all about the characters. No Nathan, but Chloe. As mentioned, there will be no Nathan Drake cameo in Lost Legacy. The team considered including one early on in the process, but couldn't figure out a way to pull it off without it seeming unnecessary and excessive. The developers said that they could imagine Drake sitting on a couch playing the new Crash Bandicoot Remastered and answering a phone call from Chloe or Nadine, but that seemed totally ridiculous. And that's okay, because we don't need a Nathan Drake cameo in this one, we have a Chloe. And to understand what makes Lost Legacy so special, we need to look more at Chloe Frazier's background. Besides being an explorer and companion of Nathan Drake, there's not much we've learned about Chloe in the previous Uncharted entries. However, we do know that Chloe is half Australian and half Indian, and it's her Indian ancestry that became a key plot motivation for the writers of Lost Legacy. Much of the story, which takes place in India, involves Chloe's personal relationship to the surrounding environment and her background in its religious culture. It will be really exciting to see how her relationship to India as well as Nadine evolves, and it's worth noting that Chloe only returns to India in search of the tusk of Ganesha, a real object from the Hindu mythology. A deep dive into Hindu mythology. The tusk of Ganesha is the MacGuffin that drives the story of Lost Legacy. It's both a symbol of Chloe's heritage and also a religious artifact of significant value. The most popular story of how Ganesha lost his tusk involves it being used as a pen to write the Mahabharata, but there are countless other tales. One story refers to Ganesha throwing his tusk at the moon and shattering it in a fit of rage. Obviously, the tusk in Lost Legacy has some basis in real Hindu culture. Part of what makes the Uncharted series so fascinating is the specificity of its mythology. In the past, Naughty Dog has managed to weave so many actual historical events and items into the Uncharted games, so this one is no exception. However, the way in which they explore this history is apparently a little different. Josh Scher, lead writer, has called Lost Legacy a deep dive into theology. Whereas previous games have focused on historical figures, Josh said that this game focuses more closely on experiences of culture and environment. He said kind of jokingly that his history minor definitely came into play on this one. The developers have also said that Lost Legacy focuses on the relics of the Hoysala Empire, and they did a lot of research to make sure that the specific religious aspects of the culture were correct. So it should be kind of fun to see what kind of Easter eggs this research drums up. Teamwork makes the dream work. While we've discussed that Chloe and Nadine were chosen due to their physical abilities, the team also was very excited to introduce two strong female characters who had never met before. At its core, Uncharted Lost Legacy is a story of these dueling personalities. As we know from previous games, Chloe is spontaneous and impulsive. She's a wheeling, dealing hustler, and to contrast her, Nadine is structured, pragmatic, and a militant leader. Sean Eskeg, the game's creative director, said that this mix of personalities makes for a good pairing, but it's also bound to create problems. We know that Nadine already has trust issues. By the time Lost Legacy begins, Nadine's company has been dismantled and she's struggling to rebuild her life. Chloe, on the other hand, has been quite successful in her ventures, and Chloe's leading the current expedition, which is unusual for Nadine because she's used to calling the shots. So there's a lot of tension right off the bat. The team really wanted to create a situation where the gamer would question if the pair would be able to work together. However, in the end, Chloe and Nadine need to team up to achieve their mutual goals and obtain the tusk. The story of their partnership reflects a lot about the development team's shared values. While it's hard to imagine, Naughty Dog is actually over 30 years old. Perhaps because they were founded by a pair of friends, they've learned that great partnerships can produce great games, and almost every game Naughty Dog has ever made has had two directors. Lost Legacy continues to fit this pattern. As stated previously, Sean Eskeg is serving as the creative director and Kurt Marginal is the game director. Each brings something different to the table. Sean has experience in storytelling coming from working on movies like Transformers. However, despite being lead animator on The Last of Us, he has no experience in game design. Kurt, on the other hand, has been a designer on nearly every entry into the Uncharted series and also has has a degree in computer science. So much like the characters in the game, the creators use this contrasting talents to balance each other out and achieve their goals. And if you were wondering, they're actually on record as saying Sean's more of a Chloe and Kurt would be, well, his Nadine. Bigger maps, more options, smaller game, tighter focus. Maybe even more important than the story, fans probably want to know what's the difference about the gameplay in Lost Legacy. Well, first, there are larger maps. The developers have referred to gameplay in Lost Legacy as wider linear. One section of the game called Western Ghats is the largest explorable area ever featured in an Uncharted. This gives gamers new opportunities to search for unexpected relics and items. This was originally something proposed during development for Thief's End, as developers wanted to make Madagascar much larger, but they had to compromise their vision to focus on story. With Lost Legacy, the team had more time to work on expanding locations early in development, so timing wasn't an issue. However, it's not just the maps. There are also new abilities, like picking locks, and this will help you explore some of the hidden places in larger areas, as you may find many locked doors and chests. This should be a compelling feature, as the designers actually bought lock-picking kits to practice and get the mechanics of the activity just right. Another change in Lost Legacy is the ability to use more stealth options in combat by avoiding fights through lack of detection. There are entire combat setups that you can skip, go around, or approach from any different direction. And the combat in Lost Legacy also feels a little different, as Chloe is more of a graceful martial arts style fighter, whereas Nathan was all about, the brute strength. But all of these options come as a sacrifice of scope. The game centers around one area of the world, and is significantly shorter and smaller in scale than Uncharted 4. While this may have allowed developers to focus on character and gameplay elements, it also affects the length of the experience. However, it seems like Naughty Dog is aware of this fact. The game is being offered only at $39.99, much less than Uncharted 4's initial $59.99 price tag. And with the added inclusion of all the Uncharted multiplayer and survival modes, that's quite a bargain. So yes, that means if you only own Lost Legacy and your friend has Uncharted 4, guess what? You can play together. And we here at Frederator did just that, so what are you waiting for? Join in. Well, there you have it. Once again, I'm Darrian P. Mack, and thanks for watching 7 Facts about Uncharted Lost Legacy. Did you play the game yet? Are you a Chloe or Nadine? Comment down below and let us know. Don't forget to click the bell icon to become part of the notification squad. And if you like getting more out of your game, subscribe to the Leaderboard, your home for video game facts.